Male and female structure are homologous. Homologous is the organs that embryologically derived from the common developmental tissue. You hear the homologous in this during this lecture, but you had to keep in mind that these organs derived from the common developmental tissue in during the embryonic life. Let's take a look to these organs. In 6 weeks of the pregnancy, the genital organ, excuse me, let me take my laser pointer. In the 6th week of the pregnancy, embryo inside the uterus of the mom have the same structure in both gender. This is the embryonic shape or embryonic organs we can see in the external body of each baby at the 6th week. After that, you can see the differentiation between the female's baby and males, but both of these organs use the same structure and developed from the same structure. Excuse me, let me accept it to your friend. Okay. If the baby chromosome contains the XY chromosome, after 6 weeks, the external genital organs change to the males, and if the baby have a XX chromosome, then it's changed to the female. The organs is colored with the same colored with this as the same colored as the same color in both picture. You can compare that is showed the homologous organ. For example, anus is in male and anus in female derived from the same structure. For example, clitorides or clitoris or glans clitoris in the female is the homologue of the penis in the male, or labia majora in the female is the homologue of the scrotum in the male. Excuse me. As I mentioned before, both of this structure derived from the or based on the same shape and derived from there. The organs derived from the common sources is named as a homologous. Okay. You can see the same structure in the same color or homologous structure in the same color. For example, glans penis and glans clitoris, it's come of the same origin. The propus of the penis and the propus of the glans of the clitoris comes from the same origin. The labia majora and scrotum come from the same structure or come out the same sources, and these are homologous. The raphe scroti is the homologous of the labia minora. You can see the major homologous structure between the two gender. For example, ovary and testis is homologous of the in between the two gender. And the both of them uh, produce gametes and sex hormones for two gender. Clitoris and glands of the penis contains autonomic nervous system axons and stimulate um, individuals um, and make sexual feelings during the intercourse. Labia majora and scrotum protects and covers some reproductive structure. Vestibular gland and bulbourethral gland is homologous organ at the same time. Both of them secreted mucosa for lubrication of the system. Excuse me. Please be in class on time or in time sometimes. Thank you so much. We can comparison the female and male reproductive systems organs. The primary sex organs called as a gonads. It's named as a ovaries in the female and testis in the male. These two organ or two gland at the same time produce the gametes, which the unit to form a new individuals. Gametes is made by the ovaries, is named as a oocytes, and the gametes is made by testis, named as a sperm. At the same time, these two organs work as a gland because secreted sexual hormones. Ovaries secreted the um, estrogen and progesterone in female, and testis secreted the androgens in the male. Both of these sexual hormones is affected the maturation, development, and change in the activity of the reproductive system organs. Both have accessory reproductive organs in both system, female and male system. It's a duct systems that carries gametes away from the gonads toward the site of the fertilization in female. It's the ampulla site or ampulla part of the uterine tube, or to the outside of the body in the male. These are named as a duct systems. Fertilization occurs when the male and female gametes meet to each other and make a new cell that have a diploid or 2n in terms of the number of the chromosome. This cells sometimes named as a diploid number, and this the initiate cell of the baby is named as a zygote. Let's take a look to the spaces that's external genital organ located in there. This space is famous as a perineum. Perineum is a diamond-shaped area, excuse me, is a diamond-shaped area between the thigh that is circumscribed anteriorly by the symphysis pubis, laterally by ischial tuberosities, and posteriorly by the coccyx. We can divide this diamond-shaped area into the two triangular shapes, or two triangle that bases to each other, form this two triangle formed by an imaginary horizontal line extended between the two ischial tuberosity of the os coxa, and divided the diamond-shaped area or perineum into anterior triangle and posterior triangle. Anterior triangle is generally named as a urogenital triangle, but the posterior triangle is famous as the anal triangle. The anterior triangle contains the urethra and vaginal orifice in female, but in the male, it's generally contain the base of the penis and scrotum. Let's take a look to this triangle. Posterior triangle contains the same things in both gender, contains the external orifice of the rectum or anus. You can see it in here. This diamond shape structure in two or perineum, and the posterior triangle or anal triangle that colored as blue. Okay. Okay. Look like another organs of the systems. We can divide the genital organs into two groups: external genitalia and internal genitalia. External genital organs is the part of the system that is visible in the urogenital triangle, and internal genitalia is the part of the systems that's located inside the body. If it's female, it's named as the internal genitalia of the female. If it's male, it's named as for example, external genitalia of the male. It's the difference between these two groups. External genitalia in female is consist of the mons pubis, labia majora, labia minora, bulbs of vestibule, clitoris, vestibule of vagina, opening, external opening of the female urethra, and ducts of the parauretral or vestibular gland. Internal genitalia of the female is consists of the ovary, uterine tube, uterus, and vagina. Let's take a look to the structure one by one. As I mentioned before, external genitalia organs is located external to the body. It consists of the different structure. For example, mons pubis, labia majora in lateral side, labia minora in between them, bulbs of the vestibule that you can see in deep part of the labia majora, clitoridis at this side or this side, external urethral orifice is in here, and the different ducts of the glands. For example, the greater vestibular glands is opened into this two opening in the lateral side of the vagina, and you can see the opening or entrance of the vagina. The female external genitalia are collectively referred as uvula. This side totally named as a uvula. You can see the same structure, deepest one, bulb of the vestibule, and greater vestibular gland is embedded inside the greater labia majora, inside this structure, and inside in the left and in the right side, we have a pair of these organs, and inside this structure, you can see the location of the clitoris. Internal genitalia are located inside the body. It's start at the level of the ovary, continue with the fallopian tube, and you can see the uterus and vagina. Vagina sometimes, or in another terms, it's named as a connection part between the internal organs and external organs, but it's a part of the system that located inside the body. For this reason, it's named or classified as internal genital organ. The mons pubis is conspicuous subcutaneous fat pad over the pubic bones. It's covered by the pubic hair and it's largely absent in males. The labia majora is longitudinal fold in the lateral side of the uvula, continues anteriorly with the mons pubis, and in the medial side or medial surface is studded with sebaceous gland, but the normal cover of the labia majora is look like a normal skin, have a hair, have a pseudoferrous glands, and look like another part of body. It's covered by skin, but the medial surface of that is covered by the mucosa. Pudendal cleft or rima pudendi is the space between the medial surface of the labia majora. Labia majora connected or junction to each other in anterior side. This is named as the anterior commissure, and connected to each other in dorsal side, and this side names as a posterior commissure. The labia majora is the homologous of the two halves of the scrotal sac, and look like a scrotal sac contains the smooth muscle. This smooth muscle inside the scrotum named as a dartus, but in the female organ, it's not the specific name. The round ligament of the uterus comes and terminated in cutaneous tissue of the labia majora. The labia minora is the smallest fold of skin in the pudental cleft. It's contain no fat and no hair. It's look like a mucosa, have a special structure, look like a mucosa in another part of the body. Vestibule of the vagina is the space between the medial surface of the labia minora. If you remember, all of this structure together names as a uvula, but the space between the two labia minora is named as a vestibule of vagina. Vestibule in Latin is the entrance, means as a entrance. Vestibule of the vagina is the space for the entrance of the vagina. This vestibule of the vagina houses the following structure. For example, external urethral orifice located in there, opening of the scan ducts. You can see in here below to the orifice of the external orifice of urethra. You can see it clearly. You can see the vaginal orifice and opening of the greater vestibular gland or Bartholin glands in the both side of the vagina. We can talk about this six opening. External urethral opening, two opening for parauretral or scans glands duct, opening of the vagina, and two opening for the greater vestibular gland or Bartholin's gland in both sides. The labia minora is have a different part, and each part is different nomination. For example, frenulum of the labia or foreshead is the fold that's made by the units of these two labia in posterior side. This side names as a frenulum of the labia or foreshead. Prepuce of the clitoris look like a prepuce of the penis is the little portion of the labia minora that covered the glands of the clitoris. Frenulum of the clitoris is made by labia minora in the lower side of the glans clitoris. The clitoris is the homologous of the skin. Prepucium is homologous of the skin that covers the glans part of the penis, but totally glans clitoris is homologous of the glans penis. The bulb of the vestibule is a special erectile tissue, oval-shaped erectile tissue inside the labia majora in both sides. It's embedded inside the labia majora, located along the base and partially subcutaneous of each labia minora and sometimes labia majora. Each bulb is a homologous of half of the bulb of the penis. Another important feature about bulb of the vestibule is that does not surround the urethra. It's so important difference between this part and spongios part of the penis because the urethra located inside the spongios corpus of the penis, but it's located outside of the bulb of the vestibule in the female genital organ. The clitoris is the homologous of the penis, as I mentioned before. It's connected to the schio pubic ramus by use of two crura in the lateral side. And the central part of that is famous as a body of the clitoris, and the tips of that is named as a glans clitoris. The body of the clitoris is suspended to the inferior side of the symphysis pubis by use of the specific ligament that names as a suspensory ligament of the clitoris. The vestibule of vagina is a specific space, as I mentioned before. It contains the external urethral ostium, the opening of the parauretral bed, parauretral ducts, and the ducts of the parauretral gland or scans gland, and vaginal orifice, and that it's may be partially closed by a special structure is named as a hymen, and the vestibular fossa is the side for the opening of the canal of the greater vestibular gland or Bartholin gland in the both side of the vaginal entrance. If you remember, we named this structure as bulb of the vestibule. In inferior side of this structure, I can see another gland is named as a greater vestibular gland. It's the homologous of the bulbourethral gland in the male. Let's take a look to the internal genitalia or internal genital organ. Uh, it's start with ovary, passing through fallopian tube or uterine tube, and ending at the level of uterus and vagina. We have a different ligament that fix the internal genital organ inside the pelvis in a specific position. That done the in the fallopian tube, ovarium, and both sides of the uterus is covered by parietal periton, and these two periton connected to each other in the lateral side of the in there and in there, and connected all of this structure into the lateral wall of the real pelvis. For this reason, it's named as a broad ligament. It's fixed the uterus, its tubes, and ovaries. Let's take a look to another structure. We have another structure, for example, mesoovarium. You know that it's a structure that connected the ovarium. It's a double fold of the peritoneum that attach the ovarium to the broad ligament. It's located at the root of the ovary and connected it into the broad ligament. If I cut the ovarium through this plan, I can see the mesoovarium. Here you can see the mesoovarium. It's the structure at the same time formed by the peritoneum, but separately connected the ovarium to the broad ligament or to the broad ligament of the uterus. Broad ligament, as I mentioned before, is the two layer of the peritoneum, drops over the uterus. This two big structure named as a broad ligament. We have a ovarian ligaments, we have a both ovarian ligaments in opposite side. One of them names as a proper ovarian ligaments proper ovarian ligaments or ovarian ligaments and suspensory ligaments of ovarium. Suspensory ligaments of ovarium connected the ovarium into the lateral wall of the pelvis, but proper ligaments of ovarium connected the ovarium into the lateral edge of the uterus. It's the difference between the nomination of these two ligaments, this one and this one in both sides. Another structure I like to talk about that the upper part of the is mesosalpinx. Mesosalpinx is the upper part of broad ligament. If I cut the structure with the same section, you can see the upper part of the broad ligament helping to fixation the uterine tube in its position, in a specific position. This structure is named as a mesosalpinx. Meso in Latin is means as a suspensory structure. The tube or the uterine tube suspend inside the abdomen by use of mesosalpinx. Or for example, the ovary suspend inside the pelvic cavity by use of mesoovary. It's the nomination of that. Okay, we can have a 10 minutes break. After that, continue to our lecture. If you have a question, I'm ready to answer.
استاد ببخشید.
بله.
من احساس کردم جزوه شما با جزوه ما یکم متفاوته. ممکنه لطفاً چک کنین؟
بله، بعضی قسمتاشو چون من این درس پزشکیم بود، بعضی قسمتاشو برای شما کوتاه کردم. بعد این نوتی که الان یعنی قبلا زده بودم تو سیستمو رویزه میکنم، این نوت جدید رو میزنم. بعضی قسمتاش برای شما خیلی جزئیات.
بله درست. Memnunum, mersi.
خواهش میکنم. Arkadaşınız şey sordu arkadaşlar. Benim anlattığım notla sisteme yüklediğim not arasında biraz fark var. Notu tıplar için hazırladığım için size biraz ağır geldiğini fark ettim dersten önce kontrol ederken. Bazı kısımlarını kısıtladım. Size yeni notu PDF halini sisteme yüklerim. Oradan alabilirsiniz. Hemen yapayım zaten. we can continue to our lesson. Okay, let me share my presentation. Okay. In the second part of the lesson, we try to learn different things about the internal genital anatomy of the female. Um, the ovary, as I mentioned before, is a gonad or is an initiate part of the system. It's have a different function. For example, production of the ovum or oocyte and secretion of the different hormones. For example, estrogen and progesterone is secreted from this gland. Um, Through these hormones, the ovary influences this cyclic maturation and discharge of the ovum and developments and maintenance of the secondary sex organs in females. Um, the ovary is little organ, firm and almond shape, have a 3 centimeter lungs, 1.5 centimeter wide, and 1 centimeter thick in normal condition. But in the case of the cyst, or in the case of, for example, ectopic pregnancy, or in different patient, it's become bigger than normal. The surface of each ovary devoid of the peritoneum, smooth until puberty, but after the puberty, after exchanging or um, after erupting by the mature follicles or ovum, it's become different in the mature ones or in the older female. Um, as I mentioned before, it suspends to the broad ligament of uterus by spatial fold or by a spatial structure of the peritoneum that's named as a meso-ovarium. Ovary is embarrassed anteriorly and laterally by the uterine tube. You can see it clearly in this photo. Excuse me, let me take my laser pointer. You can see the nearer neighborhoods of the lateral pole of the ovarium and the last part of the tube with each other. It's quite mobile and its position may vary. In the young, is held against the lateral pelvic wall by use of the ligament that we named that as a suspensory ligament of ovarium. You can see it in there clearly. Have a two surface, lateral surface and medial surface, and have a two margin. Mesoovarium margin is the side that's attached to the broad ligament and mesoovarium, and have a free edge. You can see it in here. Have a two extremities or polos, the tubal extremity and uterine extremity. It's located, you can imagine that it's located horizontally. One pole of it, it's nearer to the entrance of the uterine tube, and one pole is nearer to the body part. side or from shape, expandations of the tube is become closer to the ovary, and this side names as a infundibulum part of the tube. Let me accept your friend.
Hocam pardon bölüyorum da slide gitti bizde.
Evet bir arkadaşınıza işte odaya girmesini onaylayayım derken oradan çıktı. Hemen şey yapıyorum. Share it again. Okay. Okay. I think everything is good. Divided the tube into different parts, and the connecting part to the uterus is generally named as a uterine part. Sometimes this part names as an intramural part. If you remember, the last part of the ureters is named as this because located inside the wall of the bladder, and the same things is seen in this tube. The initiate part of the tube located inside the wall of the uterus. This is this part named as a uterine part or intramural part, the part inside the wall. Then it's continue as a isthmus part, ampulla part, and infundibulum part. Generally, in the body, where the internal diameter of the one tube is increased suddenly, that part is named as an ampulla. You can see it in here, same structure in this tube. This part of the tube is named as a ampulla. And the last part is named as a infundibulum. On infundibulum, we have a finger-like structure. Each of them is named as a fimbria. The ampulla part is a so important part in the tube because it's a site for the making the zygote. It's generally the ovum comes inside the tube, waiting there for coming the sperm. If a sperm is coming during the 72 hours after excretion from the ovum, you can see the making of the zygote or the new baby. After that, it's divided, the zygote divided and transferred during this tube to the uterus, and we can see the implantation and growing of the baby and maturation of the baby during the pregnancy. Let's take a look to the part again. As I mentioned before, this part is interstitial segments. In some references, it's named as an intramural part. In some references, it's named as ampulla. The last part is infundibulum. You can see the excoriation of the ovum from the ovarium in this photo. The infundibulum is a funnel shape, lateral expansion of the tube. The meaning of that is it comes from the shape of this structure. Have a finger-like process on it, as I mentioned before. These are named as a fimbria, one of which is connected or attached directly to the ovarium, but another one is floating and don't attach to anywhere. Inside the infundibulum, we can see the abdominal ostium of the tube. In different references, sometimes it's attached, all of the infundibulum seated is drug that's seated on top of the ovarium. It's wrong. It's located freely. Only the one or two fimbria is being in contact directly with the ovarium. After the infundibulum, you can see the ampulla part of the tube is a wide, thin walls and tortuous part of the tube. Then you can see the narrow part. This narrow part is famous as a isthmus. Normally, in normal condition, fertilization take place in the isthmus or ampulla, or sometimes between the border of them. The uterine part, or also called as intramural part, as I mentioned before, traverses the thick uterine wall. It's the side that internal cavity of the tube continues to connect it with the internal cavity of the uterine. Opens to the uterine cavity by use of the foramen that names as a uterine ostium or uterotubal junction. Here is named as a uterine ostium or uterotubal junction. We have an ectopic pregnancy. It's normally we expected that the fetus located or the zygote comes and located or fixed inside the uterine cavity, but in some condition, the pregnancy is seen out of the uterus. These are named as an ectopic pregnancy. Sometimes you can see the ectopic pregnancy inside a tube. Sometime after making a zygote, it transfers in reverse direction and comes and start to implantation inside the abdominal cavity. Both of them is famous as the ectopic pregnancy. Places to implantation. Okay. Another organs I like to talk about that is the uterus. You can see the uterus in mid-sagittal section of the pelvis and uterus The uterus of gestation, and it's somewhat pear-shaped, hollow organs that's located in a reverse position. It's have a thick wall, and the wall of the uterus is made by three main layer named as a endometrium. It's the internal mucosa of the uterus. Myometrium, a thick muscular wall of the muscular layer of the wall of the uterus, and the perimetrium is the covers that's surrounding everywhere in the different direction of this organ. And the perimetrium, in another words, is a layer of the parietal periton. It's located inside the real pelvis, behind the bladder, and in front of the rectum. You can see it clearly. I explain same things in the practical videos. You can use it. Entirely below the plan of the pelvic brim. You know that all of these three organs located inside a minor pelvis, for this reason, located below the pelvic brim in normal condition. If I talk about the dimensional features of this organ, the length of this organ is 7 to 8 centimeter, 5 centimeter between the attachments of the tube, and 2 or 0.5 centimeter posterolateral to the bladder. The uterus have a different part. For example, have a fundus part. If you remember, we talk about a fundus in the stomach. It's have a fundus too. It's a dome-shaped part of the organ. Have a corpus part and have a neck and cervix part. Cervix part is a inferior part of the uterus and invaginated inside as a cervix. This is the neck or the isthmus part of the uterus. Here totally named as a body part, and this dome-shaped structure in this organ famous as a fundus. We can divide the cervix into two portions. If I cut with imaginary horizontal plan, the superior part is named as a supravaginal part, and inferior part is named as a vaginal part, because this inferior half of the cervix invaginated into the vagina and make a two pouch in anterior side and posterior side and in lateral side. These are named as a fornices, vaginal fornices, anterior vaginal fornices, and posterior vaginal fornices. Totally, uterus have a faces, posterior surface and anterior surface. Anterior surface sometimes named as a vesical surface because be in contact with the intestinal surface, because in normal condition be in contact with the anterior surface of the rectum. Inside the uterus, we have special cavity, and you can imagine this T-shaped cavity is named as a uterine cavity. It's a small triangular shape cavity. It's covered by the endometrium, as I mentioned before. Um, this endometrium covered the inside of the uterus and continue inside the cervix. Cervix have a two ostium or orifice, internal ostium and external ostium, and have a special fold that names as a palmate fold. You can see the fold of the endometrium inside a cervix is different from the normal structure inside the uterus. These are named as a palmate fold. It's look like a leaf of the palmate tree. In normal condition, uterus located in the anteversion and anteflexion position. You can see it's the axis of the vagina, it's the axis of the red ones is the axis of the cervix, and the green ones is the long axis of the uterus. It's separated, this position separated the internal cavity or the entrance or closed the entrance to the internal cavity of the uterus and make this region sterile. It's a so important position, and you had keep in mind that uterus located in the anteversion and anteflexion position. As I mentioned before, the wall of the uterus is made by the endometrium, myometrium, and in above it's covered by perimetrium. Metra in Latin meaning as a uterus. Endo is the inside. Endometrium is the covered that it's a covered layer that covered the inside of the uterus. We have different ligaments at the site of the uterus. Some groups of them is named as a peritoneal ligament. We have a fibromuscular ligament, and sometimes ligaments derived from the subperitoneal pelvic connection tissue. Let's take a look to them. Broad ligament, as I mentioned before, is the peritoneal ligament. You can see in here, it's broad ligament. We have a proper ligament of the ovary. As I mentioned before, it's located in both sides and help to the fixation of the ovarium. We have a round ligament that fixed the uterus in the anteflexion position. It's start at the level of the tubo-urethral junction, goes anteriorly and fixed or attached to the labia majora. We have a rectouterine fold. You can see it in here. Some fold in there. You can see in there. We have a uterosacral ligament inside this fold. These are the spec 2 structure is named as a uterosacral ligament. The details about a ligament is not important for you. I like to know the name of the ligament. We have a two ligament to fixation the cervix in its position, foreseeing that I had to cut the uterus. These are named as a McEnroe's ligament, or sometimes it's famous as a cardinal ligament in anatomy. Fix the cervix from the both side into the lateral wall of the pelvis and fix the uterus in its position. You can see the structure. We have totally 2 pouch in the female between the organs. And the posterior one's names as a rectouterine pouch or pouch of the Douglas. And the anterior one names as a vesicouterine pouch. The posterior ones is the deep point of the peritoneal cavity, and we can take a sample of the peritoneal fluid from there in the female. It's named as a coldocentis. If I talk about the artery that supply blood for uterus, these are named, we have both of them in both margin of the uterus. These are named as a uterine artery. You can see it in here. It's make an anastomosis and supply blood for the ovary at the with the anastomosis with ovarian artery, and supply blood for the vagina by anastomosis with the vaginal artery. The uterine artery comes and goes inside the wall of the uterus. These are named as an arcuate branch of that. This structure give off some branches into the wall that names as a radial branch, and the last branch or the last part of the branch is give off from the radial is famous as a spiral branch. In each cycle, this spiral branch is the main causes of the bleeding during the menstrual periods. You can see the different part of the artery. We can see the same structure as uterine in the ovarium. We have arcuate artery in ovarium, radial artery, basic, and inside the wall of the uterus, we have an arcuate artery, radial artery, basal artery, and spiral artery. Spiral artery is a main source of the bleeding during the menstruation cycle. A clinical note about the uterus is the prolapsus of the uterus by the age. It's generally seen in older women after the weakening of the different ligaments inside the pelvis. The position of uterus may be changed by the time and comes down. It's repaired by the surgery techniques, but this condition named as a prolapsus of the uterus. After a pregnancy, during a pregnancy, uterus become greater and greater, come up and come out of the real pelvis. For example, in the 6 months, it comes at the fundus comes at the level of the umbilicus. After that, go up and nearer to the delivery, it comes to the level of the symphysis pubis. Excuse me, processus gyziphoideus. Excuse me. It's the long hour I try to teach some things. I missed everything with each other. Excuse me again. The last part of the internal organ is vagina, is the female organ of copulation. The word vagina means as a sheet. In real, the side is a sheet of the mucosa. In normal condition, it's 10 centimeter lungs and greatly distensible. It's flattened anterior-posteriorly. Its anterior and posterior wall lies in contact with each other. You can see it clearly in mid-sagittal section. If I go back, you can see that the two wall, the anterior and posterior wall of the vagina, be in contact with each other in normal condition. It's not your case. Uterine artery is a branch of the internal iliac artery. You can see in here, this one is the internal iliac artery. This is the site of the bifurcation. If you remember, it's a common iliac artery, and these are the two branch of the abdominal aorta. After that, it's divided into external iliac and internal iliac. The uterine artery is a branch of the internal iliac artery, have a different branches to different organs, not only supply blood for the uterus, but also for the vagina or ovarium, or have a tubal branch to supply blood for the tuba uterina. You can see the different main sources of the blood to the genital organs to internal genital organs. One of them is ovarian artery, gives off from the abdominal aorta, goes through the suspensory ligament of ovarian artery, passes through the ovarian follicle, goes through the ovarian Excuse me, I think I have a connection problem, but today lesson is finished. I added the lab of the female genital in the last few hours. Um, I check the system. If you have a question, I'm ready to answer. Okay, if you have a question during the repeat the lesson, you can ask from me by use of mail or WhatsApp.